Yeah, so why do bad things happen to good people? That's what's been on my mind this week, so let's talk about it. I think it's a very important question to ask in general and just introspectively as an individual. Why do bad things happen to good people? The short and probably unpopular answer is they don't. The longer, more complex answer can be divided into two parts. Number one, our experience of the world is limited to our interaction with the world through our senses. Number two, we rarely have enough information to accurately measure a situation as either good or bad. Our experience of the world is largely shaped by our senses, what we see, what we feel, what we touch, what we taste. I know that this is a table because I can see and touch it. So my interaction with this is based off of my senses. But the thing about our senses is that eventually they will inevitably betray us because they're not always accurate. All right. And also, what happens over time is that we create a bias over our past experiences with our senses. What we tasted will affect the next thing that we'll taste. What we see, what we hear, what we touch will affect the next thing that we experience through our senses. So there's a bias that is created over time based off of our previous experiences. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine you're in a forest and a large tree falls in front of you at a close but safe distance that you can hear the loud thump it makes when it hits the ground. Riddle me this. Will this tree make the same noise if you're removed from this scenario? If you aren't in the forest and the tree falls to the ground at the same velocity, same distance, at the exact same spot, will it make the same sound? Take your time, really think about it. The answer is no. The tree doesn't actually make a sound when it hits the ground. What happens is the impact between the tree and the ground produces waves. When they hit our eardrum, they are interpreted as sound. Our brain recognizes this impact as specific sound waves to us. When we are removed from that scenario and the tree falls, there is no sound. Sound is only experienced by us as our interpretation of the specific waves produced by the impact between the tree and the ground. Sound is our interpretation of that. The only way sound exists is if we are present to experience it. Okay? Why is this important in what I'm explaining? So let's go back to the same scenario. In a forest, tree falls, but this time you're faced away from the tree and you hear the same sound. Your immediate conclusion would be that a tree has fallen to the ground, right? But when you turn around back to face the tree, you find that it was actually a car that hit the tree, producing the same sound. Now you understand where the bias comes in from previous experiences and how our senses can be unreliable. Prior to that, you had experienced a tree fall and your brain recognized through your senses, sense of hearing, that that is the noise a tree makes when it falls. You faced away from the tree, heard the same noise or similar noise, based on previous experience concluded it's a tree falling to the ground. But on closer assessment, you turning back around, you discovered it's a car that hit the tree. So our experiences of the world through our senses cannot completely be relied upon because our senses over time become biased. Our brain builds a database of what we are experiencing every day. And just like the illustration of you hearing a sound and immediately concluding it's a tree falling to the ground is what we have as a database through the 10 years that we've lived, or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years that we're alive. We have an accumulated database in our heads of events that we've experienced through our senses that tent new experiences. What does this have to do with bad things not happening to good people? Let's take pain, for instance. There's no such thing as pointless pain. I know it sounds ridiculous, right? But to fully understand why I would make that argument, we have to understand what pain is. Let's bring it down to my level, to a level where I was able to understand it. What is pain? A simple illustration. Get your hand, put it in front of a hot plate, and you will start to experience discomfort. What is actually going on here? The nervous system is sending a message to your brain that if this hand stays here longer than it should, damage will be caused to the hand. And so the brain sends a message back. That discomfort forces you to move your hand away. The purpose of pain, in this very simple explanation, is to remove you from danger. That's number one. Number two is to create a new neural pathway that teaches you that hand on stove equals pain. So avoid hand on stove. So there are only two things happening there. The pain was necessary to remove you from that situation. And also the second thing, to teach you how to avoid that situation. So if say you're in an abusive relationship, that pain of leaving that person that you love and care about removes you from that situation, which could potentially be very, very bad. And also it teaches you to notice the patterns in future relationship and know how to avoid them. So pain is your friend. It's the only problem is that as human beings, and because we rely so much on our senses, we are so focused on what we're feeling that we don't look around. We don't see what's actually happening and recognize that this is actually removing me from a bad situation, or this is actually teaching me something. We are so laser focused on what the pain that the hand on the stove is feeling that we don't realize that it's actually protecting us from burning our skin, that it's actually teaching us to next time avoid putting your hand on the stove. Now let's explain number two. We rarely ever have enough information to accurately measure if a situation is good or bad. When you're being fired from that job, you don't have the information of what's happening 6 months from now. You only have that in retrospect, right? You lost your job. You're focused on the lost job. You lost a lover. You're focused on the lost lover. You didn't get the business deal that you wanted. You're focused on the loss of the business deal. But fast forward, who knows what job you could possibly get 6 months from then? Who knows what potential lover or husband or partner you could get 2 years from that point? Who knows what other business transaction are in store for you a year, 2, 5 from the point that you lose your business deal? We are so stuck in one moment that we don't consider the possibility of that loss being an opportunity or opening up the possibility of an opportunity. I'm sure, 100% sure, there's a list of actors and musicians and celebrities that felt left out when they were not invited to Diddy parties. Late 90s, 2000s, even through the 2010s, those were probably the hottest parties to be at if you were anybody in Hollywood. And I'm sure there are people who felt like they hadn't achieved anything in Hollywood because they were not invited to those parties. But look at what those parties represent now. At the moment, they didn't have all the information to accurately judge why they were not part of those parties. And bring it closer to home, not too long ago, someone I know, an associate, bought a sports car, very beautiful sports car. This was the car of his dreams. He came to where my office is just downstairs and they were test driving it. And the kids from my office went down there to watch. After he left, they came back and all of them were envious, even wishing they had his life or saying, I wish I was him. But like I said, we never have all the information. What ended up happening was the very next day, this guy hit a pavement with his sports car and died on the spot. Now think about everything in context. These kids that were wishing they were him, would they still be wishing they were him if they had all the information? would they still be envious if they knew what was going to happen the very next day? So we judge a situation as bad if we're only looking at that situation. We never truly have all the information at any given one time. Here's another illustration. I'll run through it very quickly. I forget what the actual story was, but I will paraphrase it. Once, long, long ago, there was a farmer who bred horses. One morning, he woke up to an empty stable. He had 10 horses the previous night, and the next morning, when he woke up, they had all run away. The entire village came to his door, appalled, telling him how this was so unfortunate and what happened was so bad and how they felt terrible that this misfortune had befallen his house. And his retort was, maybe it's bad, maybe it's not. The villagers, shocked, left his house. The very next morning, the horses that had run away returned with 90 more wild horses from the forest. All the villagers came back to his house. Oh, this is amazing. You only lost 10 horses, now you have 100 horses. This is amazing. You're so fortunate. How amazing is your life right now? And the farmer retorted, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. The villagers, confused again, left his house. The next morning, his only son was trying to tame one of the horses. And while trying to do this, it threw him off its back and he landed badly on one leg and broke it. The villagers came back once more and said, this is unfortunate. These horses are a curse. How could this happen? This is your only son. He may never walk again. This is terrible. And the farmer retorted once more, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. The villagers, confused yet again, left his house. The next day, the farmer woke up to a knock on his door. It was the army general, recruiting all able-bodied men to go to war. The farmer told him, I am too old to fight, and I would have been honored to give you my son, but only yesterday he broke his leg and can barely walk. The general took one look at the boy and knew immediately he would only drag the army behind. He left and marched off to war. The next day, one messenger came back from the war, explaining that they were brutally beaten in this battle, and every soldier that made it to the front lines was dead, and tents were being pitched in the entire village. Almost every family had lost a child. The villagers came back sorrowfully to the farmer's house. Surely you are the most fortunate among us, they said. All of our sons are dead. Yours is alive because he broke his leg. Surely you are the most fortunate among us. And yet again the farmer retorted, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. The moral of the story qualifies the second reason I gave you. We never have enough information to judge a situation as either good or bad. We can only look at a situation and judge it one way or the other in retrospect, after we have experienced it and seen the consequences of that specific action. The simple answer is bad things don't happen to good people. We just look at individual events and prematurely label them as good or bad. I know this because 25 years ago, I was probably at the lowest point of my life. This loss that I experienced was probably still to this day the most defining loss to me. And it made me look at life differently, people differently, situations differently. It made me interact with the world in a very different way. Looking at it and every other situation that I labeled as bad, in retrospect, it's difficult for me to look at those moments with regret or with hurt or with pain, because those moments shaped who I became, and those moments informed the decisions that I later made. I'm forced to wonder if those defining hurtful moments or bad moments that happened in my life didn't happen exactly as they did, would the extremely life changing good moments that happened, would they have happened? If I didn't lose some of the business deals that I've lost, would I have thought the same way that led me to securing better deals? If I hadn't lost some of the romantic relationships that I've lost, would I have ended up meeting new people that proved to be pillars in my life? If I hadn't lost the people that I've lost in my life, would I still view the world with the same empathy and patience and kindness and love as I do? If I didn't experience a certain level of struggle, would I look at a teenager on the street experiencing the same struggle with the same empathy and willingness to help them as I do now? So, all of these questions make it very difficult for me to regret the bad things and inevitably make me conclude that those things, in retrospect, were not actually bad. They were necessary to create the person that I am today. Take them out, I'd be a completely different person. Napoleon Hill, one of my favorite authors, wrote, "Every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it a seed of equal or greater benefit." Those have been my thoughts this week, and wherever you're listening to this from, wherever you're watching this from, I hope you're having an amazing day. And as always, dare to be great. See what happens. Peace.